everybody for joining us here today. My name is Michael Boeke, and I'm here to talk about trust. But before I get started, I want to ask a favor, and I need to ask this question. Is anyone in the audience willing to lend me 10 euros until the end of this talk? I'll take other denominations too. I know we have an international crowd here. I'll take dollars or pounds right to the end of the talk, and I promise I will give it back. Is somebody willing to make that call, make that bet? I see anybody. I see one coming over here. I see a gentleman getting his wallet out. It's a brave soul. Your choice, my friend. All right, we can do that. I will have the crowd be my witness. This gentleman just gave me $20 US, a very brave soul indeed. You won't regret it, probably. We'll see. Excellent. We'll come back to this later on in the presentation. So I'm here to talk about trust, as I said. And what is trust and why does it matter? When we're babies, like this cute little guy here was my son when he was born, we have no choice but to rely on our parents completely for everything. And as we grow up, we have to begin to make choices about who we trust and who is trustworthy. And it's critical because it's the entire basis of how we interact with new people, with the people that we've never met before. It's the basis of the transactions that we make in the marketplace when we're buying and selling things. And when you have it, wonderful things can happen. At a macro level, societies that have a higher level of social trust tend to have better commerce and economic prosperity. And at a micro level, teams that work together with a high degree of trust tend to get things done more effectively. And we live in interesting times. In America, where I live, we have people who measure trust, actually, the data wonks who go out there and do surveys. And what they found is that trust in institutions and individuals has been falling for a really long time. And they see that public trust in institutions like government, media, and religion are all way down over the last 40 years. We also see the trust in individuals is down too. The number of adults who reported that they trust most people has dropped to only about a third of the country. And yet all around us, people are engaging in all sorts of new exchanges based on trust. Because while trust has been declining over the last several decades, we haven't retreated back into our caves and shut out the outside world. To the contrary, we've been increasingly willing to buy and sell things from strangers online. Witness the rise of eBay and Gumroad and Craigslist, which Craig Newmark has called a social experiment in trust. But people aren't just buying and selling things through classified ads. We're also getting rides from strangers that we find online. And we're opening up our homes to strangers who find our places online. We're sending our life savings to institutions where we've never met any of the employees there face to face. We're finding dates with strangers that we find online. And sometimes we're maybe even finding our mates and spouses with strangers that we meet online. Now, this is a Craigslist personal ad, and for folks who aren't as familiar with Craigslist, which dominates the United States, it's kind of like a Gumroad-style classified ads. And this is a Craigslist personal ad posted by my little brother, the goofy little guy, and it reads, in case you can't see it, Lakeview Sausage Fest for dinner. No, this is not a joke. There really is a poorly named sausage fest in Lakeview, which is a neighborhood in Chicago this weekend. Do you like eating sausage, drinking beer outside on a glorious weather day? Yes, me too. Let's hit up Sausage Fest for dinner tonight. Now, I just cringed when I saw this, that he put this out there. And I had to think to myself that it actually took a lot of courage for him to do this, to trust that somebody out there would respond to this. I thought nobody would. No woman would be crazy enough to respond to this. But one did. There was one out there. And actually, they hit it off after Sausage Fest, and 18 months later got married, and I have a new sister-in-law, all because of online trust that both of them were willing to engage in with this online ad. And I've been thinking about trust and design for a really long time, due to the types of products that I've worked on in my career. I've basically spent the last decade or more bringing sensitive information onto the internet, working in healthcare, investments, and online payments. I worked at several Chicago-based technology startups, going way back to the primordial ooze of the internet and the dot-com era. I was the designer of an early social network for hospitalized patients and their families called Care Pages, which is still in use at a lot of children's hospitals. Then I was the first designer at another startup that made some of the first SaaS software for hedge funds and other institutional investors. And after that, I moved on to Braintree, where I was a product manager for a platform that accepts payments for all sorts of companies like Uber and Airbnb and Basecamp, and that was eventually acquired by PayPal. And I've been thinking about trust a lot again lately because I've been working on something new. It's not a dating app to promote Sausage Fest, but it's something called Synap, where we're building a platform to help people get to collaborate better, especially people at software companies, digital agencies, and consulting groups. And what Synap does is automatically organize all your customer communications at every stage in the relationship by connecting communications tools that your teams already use. So our software will connect to email, file sharing, help desk software, CRM platforms, and automatically build like a Facebook or Twitter style feed of all the interactions that are going on between the people at your company and the interactions they have with customers. Because of the product we're building, we're actually inviting our users to interact with a higher level of trust than a lot of other business software does in order to accomplish incredible things and provide better customer service. So, for example, one of the things we enable users to do is to see the emails that their actual teammates are sending to customers. And this is fantastic for customer success, for account managers, consultants, other people who are collaborating on projects for clients. Because without Synap, that type of information tends to get just trapped in one person's inbox. But it requires a lot of extra trust among teammates and in the platform that we're building for users to buy into that. And since Synap is actually going to organize users' messages and information for them, they'll have to trust our app to make good choices and make their lives easier. And we also need them to trust us and to connect to their systems without screwing up their data, while maintaining the privacy and confidentiality of their communications. So that's why I've been thinking about trust again a lot lately. But don't worry, this won't be a 40-minute infomercial for Synap, the thing I'm building. We're still early in development, and we haven't launched to the public yet. But if you are interested, you can go to Get Synap and sign up for the beta list and be one of the first teams to try it. Now, I want to start by sharing a project that helped really shape the way that I think about the subject of trust and building for trust. While building the Venmo Touch product when I worked on the Braintree team, my colleague John Strino came up with this concept of the cool, creepy line. And there was a lot of discussion at the time on this project about how we could provide the right information and messaging to make sure that we ended up on the cool side of things. Because we realized that if a user sees their sensitive information show up somewhere unexpected and they're not sure how it got there, they're going to be find it disconcerting and creepy. And that feeling may overwhelm any magic or benefit that they receive from the feature. But if a user sees their sensitive information being used in a way to make their life easier, and they understand how that information got there, and they trust the company who makes the app, then they're likely to think it's cool. So how do we achieve this? How do we make sure that we end up on the cool side of the cool, creepy line? I think it comes down to a couple of key concepts, which are transparency and control. We offer our users transparency about how their information is being used, and give them control over the information, including intelligent defaults. So we can take a look at what that looks like in practice, kind of using this project that we were first working on where we came up with this concept. Venmo Touch was a way essentially to store your payment information for later use in other apps. And the team that designed the Venmo Touch UI has applied both of these principles, as we can see here. It clearly states what's going to happen when a user chooses to use Venmo Touch, providing transparency. And it offers links to more detailed information. And it also offers users a choice about whether to participate or not, offering control over what's going on with their personal information. So we're going to talk about transparency a lot today. I'm going to talk about transparency a lot today because it's the foundation for everything else in trust. And the more information you have about a person or a company that you're considering trusting, the more confident you can be that you're making a good decision when you're interacting with them. And starting off with some good questions like, who are the people behind this app? Or can I talk to them? So I think one of the things that particularly smaller organizations can do is show the actual people who build the product and support the customers right on the website for the company. One of my favorite examples of this, actually, the one that I'm showing up here, is Kickstarter's team page. Not only do you get to see the people behind the service, but you also get a strong sense that the flavor of the people are coming through in the product that they're building and how that finds its way into the product experience. That's one thing to show the people behind the product, but it's another thing to actually be able to talk to them. People often inherently just trust larger companies because there isn't an actual person that they can call and talk to. It's really hard to get a person at Google, actually, if you need to get support for your Gmail or to do something else because they have such a huge customer base. But you can make it easy for people to contact the folks behind the website. Zappos is really renowned for their customer service. And you can see that they stick their contact information in the most conspicuous place possible, right in the upper left corner of their website. Rackspace is another company that's built its reputation based on what they call fanatical support. And they also include phone and chat links right at the top of their homepage, making it really easy to contact and talk to the people who build their service. Now, how do we incorporate some of that experience into the products that we build and not just on our website? I think Betterment is a good example of that. Betterment is an online investment service in New York for retirement and other savings accounts. And their customers essentially trust them with their life savings. They do a good job of showing the people who support their customers right on their website, as we were seeing with some other examples. But beyond that, they also build it into their product onboarding through a high-touch onboarding process. So after we actually rolled over one of my wife's retirement accounts over to Betterment through their app, we got a nice message from Archana, one of their reps, from her direct email address, not from just some customer support account. And we could see that she was actually somebody who was listed on the website, kind of drawing that connection, adding a human element directly into their onboarding process in their app, even when we didn't actually talk to anybody at Betterment. Uber is another app, I think, that has thought about how being transparent about the people involved should be part of the app experience. When a driver accepts your request on Uber, you get both their license plate number and a picture of the driver in the app so you can see who's coming. And it helps to make sure that you're hopping in the right car when they show up, because it's something that can happen, ending up in the wrong vehicle. But being able to see the driver and the license plate numbers helps to build confidence in the Uber service and trust that your ride's going to be a good experience. You can also be transparent about your customers. I know that might sound a little bit weird at first. You probably wouldn't want to post your customer list of everybody who uses your app online, and your customers probably wouldn't like that either. In fact, in some cases, that could be a really deep breach of trust with your customers. But depending on the type of product that you offer, there may be some ways to do this through an approach of social proof. And social proof is really just the phenomenon of being persuaded by the actions of others. And it's especially powerful when the others are someone the user respects and trusts. And one way to achieve this is through testimonials or endorsements. It can be as simple as listing a handful of logos from your best-known customers, as Basecamp does here on their website. But of course, you better get their permission from the customers first and give them control over whether or not their logo is going to be featured on your website. But lots of people and companies are willing to do this for trusted vendors if you've got a good relationship, and they may even appreciate the extra marketing exposure for their own companies. Testimonials are another great way of being transparent about your customers, but there are a few things you have to keep in mind. A lot of viewers, a lot of users will just discount reviews and testimonials that are attributed to customers that they don't actually know. They'll think that you're just kind of making up stuff and posting it to your website to make yourself look good. So there are a few techniques to help them to feel more authentic. And the first is to use celebrities if you can. Customers know these are real people, and they're probably trusted as authorities on their subject matter. And we can see that in this example from Shopify. People know Tina Roth-Eisenberg from the Swiss Miss blog that she publishes. And a lot of folks in America know Damon John from the TV show Shark Tank, which is the US version of Dragon's Den. He's one of the investors on that program. So folks know who those folks are, or know who these people are who are giving the testimonials and trust them as experts in the field. But you may not have the ability to get celebrities to come in and endorse your product. That's tough for most of us. Another approach then is to use real customer photos. And they give users a sense that the testimonial is from a real live human that they can connect with. And Highrise found this out when they modified their landing page to use customer photos. And their conversion rate went up by actually over 100%. And that was a powerful boost in trust and in sales too in that case. Another way to approach this entirely is through referrals. There's a lot of hoopla about growth hacking techniques for gaining new customers, and those are usually the things that offer monetary incentives for referrals. The prototypical give $10, get $10 off an Uber or Lyft kind of promotion. Or in this case from Dropbox, get some free storage space if you invite some friends to use Dropbox. But one of the often unspoken benefits of referrals is that they're actually super targeted social proof marketing. The referrer of the service is explicitly endorsing that product, and their endorsement is really perfectly targeted to the people who would actually care the most about that person's endorsement. It's their friends and families and other people that they're inviting. So it's another great way to establish some trust by actually featuring your own customers, or letting them feature themselves in this case. also want to talk about being transparent about motives. I think as designers and developers, we sometimes don't want to get our hands dirty with the businessy stuff. However, business models affect the motives of an organization, and they can manifest themselves in our products and our designs that we build. Jared Spool talks about how business models are explicitly designed, and that's why business is built into the UX design curriculum at Center, the school that he started with Leslie Jensen Inman. Users need to understand how an app is making money, lest the old adage ring true that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. In other words, that your data is the thing that the app is trying to get and sell and monetize in some way. The extreme example of this was the flashlight app stealing customer data. Famously, one of the top free flashlight apps on Android a few years back was capturing users' location and device ID data and then selling that data to advertisers without informing the users of the app that they were doing that. And bad examples like this can make users really wary and distrustful of other free services that are out there. I know that was the case for me. I've been a really happy Sunrise user for a long time. Sunrise is a really great calendar app, but I got nervous after using it for a while. It had been more than a year, and I didn't see them charging money for anything at all. I know a little bit about startups and was thinking they must be burning through their funding, or maybe they have a revenue stream that wasn't that obvious. So I tweeted to them about it, and they quickly tweeted back that, no, we promise we're going to be charging for something soon, trying to allay that fear, because they realized that it was important for them for the trust with their customers as well. Turns out their actual plan was to sell to Microsoft, which they did later on. But as a user trusting them with my data, I really wanted to know about their business. Now, sometimes the motives at hand can just get muddled. In this case, from Ticketmaster, I'm not even sure the people who work at Ticketmaster actually know what their motives are in this page, and that's coming out in their user experience. After purchasing tickets for an event, they hit you with 2 separate light boxes on the same page, when a light box is really supposed to focus your attention on one thing. There's a barrage of other calls to action on this page. I've kind of highlighted all the different things they're trying to get you to click on at one spot. But if Ticketmaster really cared about the survey that they're highlighting, they should really give it the spotlight it deserves, because the user's being pushed in different directions here. And it calls into question the motive behind any of the different things they're trying to get a user to do on this page. For instance, there's a lot of pop-ups here. If I click on one of those as a user, am I going to go to some scammy website that's going to take over my browser? Do they really care what I think, or is this just some way for them to try to sell and add on some more sales after the fact? I'd be willing to bet that this really hurts their conversion rate on the survey that they're trying to put in front and center here, and probably limits the amount of feedback they're receiving. Also, for folks with sharp eyes, as an aside, you may notice that I was purchasing tickets to Monster Jam. People who don't know me see me doing all this refined design-y stuff and are often surprised to find out that I love monster trucks. But if you don't think that this is awesome, we have very different definitions of this word. So next I want to talk a little bit about pricing. Of course, if you want people to trust you, you can't bait and switch them with hidden fees and other shadiness. And I'm going to assume anybody who showed up here today is not engaging in any of those types of dark patterns, because if you are, then this entire presentation is probably lost on you. But I do want to talk about something that's actually much more common and maybe not as obvious, hopefully just a little bit slightly less shady. So this is a quote from the venerable Jacob Nielsen, who wrote a piece ages ago entitled "The Top 10 Mistakes That You Can Make on Your The Top 10 Mistakes You Can Make on Your Website." And one of the things that he called out was sites that don't list their pricing. You can see he's got this quote here. It said, "We have hours of video of users asking, 'Where's the price?' while tearing their hair out." It's actually what happened to me as I was shopping for SaaS software at one point along the way. SaaS software providers are oftentimes some of the most egregious in this regard of not posting their pricing. And as Nielsen rightly points out, price is one of the most critical pieces of information that a purchaser has for categorizing and making decisions about your product. If you withhold such a crucial piece of information from users on your website, then your site visitors are bound to be distrustful. It's perfectly illustrated by the cartoon that he'd included in the post, where the tactics compared to a shady used car salesman. In this case, the purchaser's asking, "How much is it with an automatic transmission?" And he says, "I'll give you a hint. It's an even number." The crazy thing is that Nielsen was writing about this back in 2003. And if you fast forward more than a decade, this is still really rampant on a lot of websites. Evidence of this is a tweet storm from PJ McCormick. He's the UX design lead at Amazon's Creative Services. I picked just a couple of choice tweets from his barrage. You can read a couple of them here. He says, "All SaaS products everywhere. One of my first questions in all situations all the time is how much you cost. Please stop hiding that info." And I've reached the point where I go straight to a SaaS site's footer for pricing info because it's sure as hell not going to be in the main nav. You can hear the frustration bubbling up here. He's practically tearing his hair out. We can't see him do that in the tweet, but you can just imagine him as he's writing this with one hand pulling on his hair. So why do companies do this? I think oftentimes there's an idea that a user might be frightened away by the cost of a product. But the thinking is that if they try it out, or if a sales rep can actually talk to them and articulate the value of it, then they'll keep them moving down the sales funnel and get them closer to making the sale. But my experience doesn't really make me convinced of this reasoning. As I mentioned earlier, I worked in payments for a while at Braintree for several years. And payments companies in particular are notorious for having really confusing and complicated pricing listed for their websites. When I started at Braintree, we listed our pricing out on the webpage, but it was very complicated. It filled like an entire screen with all the different permutations of how we would price payments. And getting started required emailing or calling a sales rep before you could actually start getting started with the service. And we moved to an instant sign-up process while I was there. It was one of the first projects I work on, and a simple pricing that we could articulate in one line. And the result? Well, I wish we kept a little bit more detailed data on each of the different things that we had changed, but overall our signups increased by more than 10 times as we made these changes, and they continued to grow after that. And that was due to a variety of factors, not just the pricing change, but we had enough positive feedback about the path that we were on and the approach that we were taking that we knew we were really on the right track. We eventually moved the pricing info right to be front and center on the homepage of the Braintree site and the next site redesign, to great results. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit. We've been talking about transparency, but I also want to talk about the other aspect of designing for trust, which is control, which is obtaining consent from users to do something with their private information in your app or on your website, giving them control over what information they want to share and what information they want to keep private. A lot of us are iOS users, Apple users, and iOS has recently done a lot to improve control and transparency on their platform. They show those little colored bars at the top of the screen when your microphone's activated or when your camera's been activated or location services in the background, and they give users a chance to turn that stuff off and have a lot of control over what's happening. But even with those things sort of baked into the iOS app, some apps still really overreach with the permissions or other requests for information. For instance, this Fandango app wants to use your location, which is reasonable because it wants to find cinemas near you and offer relevant film showing time so you can find a movie to go to in your area. However, the permission it asks for is to use your location at all times, even when you're not actually looking for a film to go and see. And that seems a little bit crazy, especially since iOS has a concept built in of just using location services when the app is in use, which would be a much friendlier way to give users control over that information that they're sharing, their location. And whenever we as designers and developers are asking users to take control of what they share, we also have to do our utmost to make certain that they can understand the consequences of their choices. Facebook is a company that's gotten its butt kicked a lot publicly for privacy and control issues, and pretty well deservedly so. A few years ago, their privacy controls were so laughably bad that it actually prompted Dave McClure of 500 Startups to offer this translation of their privacy controls on his blog page, where it explains which things will be visible to your boss, which things will be visible to your mom, which things will be visible to your girlfriend, which things they would actually be able to see. Now, Facebook, to their credit, do a lot better with this stuff now. This screen is vastly simplified, and plus it's a lot friendlier with that little dinosaur guy hanging out in the top there. He feels like somebody you'd want to trust. But this is still a list of settings and changes that a user needs to go and explicitly make and adjust in the background at some point. I think the most successful sharing controls that are out there are constructed in a way that makes them intuitive to the user as they're actually sharing their information. And Google Plus actually got this pretty right with their circles approach to sharing. Anytime I post something on Google Plus, I choose which of the circles to share with. And those circles are lists of people that I actually created and named, so I know exactly who's going to see what I'm sharing in any of those circles. It's just too bad that nobody cares about Google Plus and there's nobody out there to see anything I would post there anyway. But they, I think, did a good job with these sharing controls. One of the other standards for control these days is OAuth. It's a process that I think most of us are familiar with from social sign-in flows, like for services like Facebook and Google and Twitter, where you can sign in to some other app or website with those controls. And taking Google's OAuth flow as an example, it's the one that we use to connect to Gmail in Synap. We can see how they clearly show the permissions and explicitly ask for your consent on these things. So providing some transparency of what's going to be shared and some control to the user about whether or not they choose to give another app access to those information. I think they could probably improve this. I think the entire OAuth process could actually be improved by doing a better job of showing which information was more or less sensitive. It's not such a big deal to share your public profile information with another app, but it may be a larger leap to trust an app to modify your information by creating emails or posting to your social profile. But OAuth, I think, is a really good step in the right direction for giving users both transparency and control. Another important element of control is to give users the tools they need to modify the choices they've already made in an app or a website, to undo the actions they've already taken. I heard a fantastic talk from a couple of the women on Google's Android UX team. They pointed out that the dialogues asking a user, "Are you sure you want to delete this?" were really damaging to the user experience. So, because they plant the seed of doubt, making the user feel as if their judgment might be suspect, kind of second-guessing them along the way as you make choices in an app. So what the Android team decided to do was to eliminate these confirmation dialogues entirely from the Android UI. And instead, they offer an undo functionality in its place. And this has since found its way into many of Google's products. For example, they have their Inbox app, which is a great email client. And across the browser, the mobile app, pretty much everywhere else that you would interact with Inbox, every action you take in Inbox results in the opportunity to undo immediately what you just did. And this builds trust with the user because they know that some errant tap or click on something in the app is not going to permanently delete or send some data or send something important. And that trust enables the user to get more done because they can interact with the app more quickly and without the fear of making mistakes. And sometimes we need to give the user the chance to undo the choices that our products make for them. With Synap, we automatically link up to contacts and companies that we find in your inbox and link them all together. It's powerful and we hope a magical experience, but we know we can't get it right every single time, which is why it's critical for us to give users the option to change those associations and to change those decisions that our platform's making for them, just in case we've gotten it wrong and say Hank Hooper's information doesn't belong with Cabletown here. A user can always go and undo that change or reclassify the information that we've already organized for them. So from the beginning, I've been talking a lot about transparency and control, and those concepts are crucial to trust. However, I don't think they're quite enough. I think there's a third element that also has to exist that holds these other two together, and that element's integrity. And depending on your point of view, that statement probably sounds either blatantly obvious or maybe a little bit pretentious. But what I mean here simply is this, that you have to do what you say you're going to do. The more often you do just that, the more trust that you'll build with your users and your customers. And if you don't follow through on what you promised, you may never get a chance to repair the trust that you've damaged because your users can move on to another app or to another vendor. But how do we demonstrate our integrity? One of the ways we can do that is through consistency. Uber got themselves in trouble a while back when it got out that certain executives at the company were accessing something called God mode in Uber's control panel to see where individual named passengers were in real time. Now, Uber says they have policies in place that limit the use of God mode except by the few people who need it to operate the service or to support their customers, and I have no doubt that that's true. The problem is they got caught applying this policy inconsistently. You can't make a promise and just keep it most of the time. You have to remain consistent all the time. Also, as a side note here, if you're building a product that can raise serious potential privacy concerns, do not name your admin screen God mode. It's really creepy as hell, and it's bound to come back and bite you along the way. So, pro tip, as we're out there building other stuff. You can also prove our integrity through the quality of our products. And quality really is just another word for integrity, except with quality, you're answering the customer's question of, can you actually do what you say you're going to do? If you have poor quality in the products that you're building, it's a sign that you may not be able to deliver and do what you say, even if you want to. If an app shows carelessness with bugs and typos, can users trust it with money and personal information? Quality is key to that trust and to the user experience. As an example, my wife and I hate doing laundry. It's a time-consuming, never-ending chore, especially with kids in the house that are going through multiple outfits a day. So we were really excited to try this new on-demand laundry service that came to Chicago. However, neither of us could really get successfully signed up in the app. We ended up having to leave the mobile app aside and actually go sign up on a website on a computer. That was the first bad sign. When we tried to schedule our first order, it took multiple tries before that order would go through, but we wanted to try it so badly, we kept persisting, and eventually our order went in. The end result? They lost all of my pants. They delivered somebody else's underwear in a bag to my house, and they ripped several pieces of our clothing. And when we called their perfectly pleasant support rep, he said, "Wow, you're being really calm about this." And I realized that I wasn't even mad because their app had told me what to expect from their service in the first place. It was really our fault for trusting them after delivering such poor software. It was clear they didn't have their act together. I knew before I went, should have known before I went in what the end result was going to be. Now, when I was first putting this talk together, I asked the Twitterverse, what are the elements of design that help you to trust a website? I was trying to crowdsource a little bit of ideas for this talk, and lots of people replied with the same thing: locks. A lot of sites seem to agree with this. If you Google for lock icons, you'll find hundreds of thousands of options out there. Now, security is not the same thing as trust, but they are related. In fact, you probably can't have the latter without the former. And you can show all the lock icons you want, but you have to prove that you're competent in order for people to trust you. And that's going to happen by deploying actual sound security practices and by cultivating good habits within the teams that create the product. Now, one of the most powerful ways you can prove your integrity is to submit to the oversight from some outside disinterested party. And it's often not really palatable for a lot of us because it requires a lot of busy work and it requires letting somebody else to literally get up in your business. But this is the reason why it carries some weight with users. I was just making fun of lock icons a little bit, and many of us who work in technology don't place a lot of stock in these types of badges and security badges. After all, they often just mean that you've met the minimum requirements for something. I mean, if you've deployed SSL on your website, big deal. That's like the minimum responsible thing that any of us are going to do. And it's table stakes for most developers. But from the position of a new user who may not really understand how the internet works, these kinds of badges can encourage trust in the website. I think it's perfectly suited for an app like Mint, which is asking relatively unsophisticated users to share some of their most sensitive financial information with them. It gives them some idea that some other party out there has verified that this is going to be legitimate. And this can also be tackled not just within an app, but also at the company level. B corporations, or B Corps, are for-profit companies that actually include having a positive impact on society or in the environment, listed as part of their legally defined goals as a business, in addition to making a profit. They can choose to go through a certification process, and as part of that process, they have to provide an annual report of how they fared in reaching all of their goals, and they have to submit to certification and review of their processes and outcomes. And we're seeing more and more companies who value trust and transparency start to go through this process. Respected companies like Etsy and Warby Parker, which I think is a really positive sign. So I've covered a lot of ground. Let's go back to why we should go to the effort to do any of the things maybe that I've suggested today. Mike Montero of Mule Design gives a fantastic talk called How Designers Destroyed the World. It's a tremendous call for ethics in design and a reminder that as we're exploiting all this contextual information that we can glean from our users and personal data, we have a responsibility to handle it very carefully. And yes, we want our products to be successful and make money and all that other jazz, but in the end, it boils down to what Montero says. As designers and as the maker of stuff, we are responsible for what we put out into the world. And for me, that's reason enough to try to build that bond of trust with my users and my designs. So, speaking of having integrity, what about that $20 in this case, not euros, because we went US dominated. Am I going to give it back? Did he make a good choice in trusting me? So let's think about this through maybe the lens of the things that we've talked about in terms of transparency. Told you what I was going to do, said I was going to give it back at the end of the talk. Also, this audience knows probably a fair bit about me from the speaker bios and other things that were included in this talk, so there's transparency. You could probably track me down if you needed to after the fact. Control. You can control whether you participated. I didn't pick his pocket or run a 3-card Monte game on him or anything else to try to trick him into giving the money. So there was control and some choice there. And then integrity was a big test. Am I going to do what I said I was going to do at the end of this talk? I could just like run out of here and go buy a pizza and a glass of wine somewhere. There seem to be so many good places to do that in Milan. But no, of course, I'm going to give it back. Of course, right now, I'm going to do a little bit better than that even. Oh, there we go. I'm going to give you my card here at the end, and I'd like to send you a free book, which I ran out of them at home. But this is actually a really great book called Discussing Design. It's new. It came out from Adam Connor and Aaron Azari. It really talks about discussing design and providing positive feedback as you're working on building new things. So I'll have a copy shipped to you. Don't leave without making sure that I get your address. So key takeaways from the talk today, I think, for making sure that we keep things cool instead of creepy. One, giving users a view into what you're doing and why. Enabling users to control their data and how it is used in your app or on your website, and just do what you say you're going to do. I think if you do all these things, your users will reward you with their trust and willingness to share and make sure that you're pretty cool. So thank you for everybody for coming to join me today and for bearing with a few of the technical glitches at the beginning here. I'm happy to take a few questions from the crowd here, if there are any. I think we might have a couple minutes left. No, we're running out of time. I'll wait here off onto the side. If anybody's got questions, I will can pull to the side here and answer them right afterwards. What's that? Okay, we might have time for 1 or 2 questions, but I'll be sure to stick around just outside here afterwards for anybody who wants to chat. If you're curious about any more on this topic, feel free to find me. I'm easy to find on Twitter or at my company website. And I'll be around for the rest of the conference if you want to find me. Thank you very much.